everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Experience Maker Live. I'm Dan Gingiss, customer experience keynote speaker and coach, and happy to be here with you again, as we are every Thursday with some incredible guests, and I will get to today's guest in just a moment. This is a really interesting week because all sorts of religions around the world are celebrating holidays. There's Easter, there's Passover, there's Ramadan. But only one of them lends its name to another type of experience. Of course, I am talking about Easter eggs, and I just wrote a blog post about Easter eggs this week. You can find it right here. Let me take out the picture, and then I can show you where you can find it. You can find it at dangingiss.com/Easter eggs. And I went through and shared the history of Easter eggs in video games, movies, software technology. Gave some fun examples from that I've had in my own world, and also would love to hear yours. So Easter eggs are such a cool way to insert a little bit of fun into your experience, and hopefully it was a good, timely story. So speaking of stories, today's guest is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Storyhub, which is focusing on taking big data and turning it into stories so that people can understand it and use it and take action on it. So I am very excited today to introduce you to Andy Greenwalt. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate the pivot and happy whatever holiday you happen to celebrate. It's great to be here.
You see how I brought stories in there just seamlessly, right? So why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and Storyhub. Where did it come from? How'd you start it?
Sure. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I like to describe I was a horrible employee. So I've started companies, and background in philosophy and cognitive linguistics. So always a bit of a sort of odd duck, and so got into building tech companies. And along the way was always in the position of sitting on all of this data and loving the next thing, the next new thing, and customers all at the same time, and sitting at that confluence. And as more and more things went to SaaS, every business is sitting on all of this data that can make them so much smarter about their customers. And that was really the opportunity that we saw with Storyhub, was how can we take this data that right now people only get to 5%, 10% of it. And while they say they're data driven, most of it goes idle. And their customers' journeys are all littered through all of these different data sets, from the e-commerce to the website traffic to the CX proper service data sets, reviews, different things like that. So Storyhub looked at that and said, okay, how do we create a different experience from this data to really let brands grow closer to their customers, understand friction, and do that in a way that really lets them move change into their organization, so they can sort of close the gap between the customer's experience and the company and the team inside of it. So that was the genesis of Storyhub, was pursuing that.
Well, I love that idea, and especially as you mentioned that companies are just absolutely drowning in data and they don't know what to do with it. And one of the things I like to talk about is this idea that the end result of data should not be another report that you throw onto a C-suite person's desk, right? Because they already got a lot of reports and they don't probably need another one. And without some sort of context or action to take based on whatever the data is, it's really not particularly useful. So can you give us an example of how we might take some sort of complex data and turn it into a story?
Well, it's I love that you use the word useful, because that is we use that all day, every day, because anything that we do needs to be a tool that is useful for something. And so simple examples, what can be useful. So a product has a defect. Maybe it's clothing and it's a size problem that, these things get made in batches and someone put the wrong label on it. So the smalls are really mediums. And so that's a little thing that you can detect in the data and surface immediately, because now there's 300 people that bought something that we know it's going to not fit. So let's let them know in advance, because as you know, to err is human. And if you can just get ahead of it, that's a dramatically better experience. So a story simply, escalates that fact, not in a statistical, data-driven way. It's simply like, this dress doesn't fit. These are the people that bought it. Contact them, get ahead of that. So, you can have something like that. Other things are, we have stories that are customer rescues. So, there's been too many back and forths with an agent, maybe, where clearly, it could be, hey, look, a New Yorker is talking to someone from Alabama, and there's just a disconnect. This happens. It's a very practical thing. Well, you can see that in the data. So there are, big data epiphanies and little data epiphanies and all of these things. But at Storyhub, we get that into a news feed that's super consumable, because the problem with, static dashboards, kind of dumb dashboards, like they're great for KPIs, which, I'm generally more dubious than positive on, because it's really novel situations that surface that are interesting and actionable. And dashboards do a bad job with novelty. So those are a couple of examples.
It's funny. I actually did just have that problem where I ordered a pair of jeans.
Yep.
And the numbers, they have the waist and the leg,
Yep.
and the numbers were reversed. And so as soon as I put them on, I'm like, yeah, this is not fitting, because it's way too tight and way too long.
Right.
And wondered whether that was a theme or I just happened to be the unlucky one. So I'm assuming that you're using artificial intelligence to look at this data and come up with these stories. Tell us a little bit about how it works.
So how it works is it plugs into all of the applications. So one of the realities of today's SaaS-y environment is that there are a dozen, 15, 18 tools that are used across the customer's journey. So you kind of have what we call a Humpty Dumpty problem, right? Is that it's all broken up into pieces, and so understanding the customer's journey needs, we need to pull those things back together again. So we have turnkey APIs that plug into the likes of the Shopify on the e-commerce side, or the Zendesk, or Yotpo for reviews, or Stella for agent reviews. All of those different piece parts get reintegrated, and so Storyhub is running analysis across these things and really looking for fingerprints. So there are fingerprints that are that clothing, mismatch. So typically, just as a single example, we're looking at dimension of size on every transaction. So we know that typically clothing will have a sizing mismatch at about 8 to 12%. So when we see something go to 42, like, that is an outlier. That is a problem with the garment. That is not this kind of, anomaly doesn't happen in the wild. So because we understand what the baselines are, the fingerprint is looking for material deviances from the baseline that persist. And that tells us that it's an actual problem. Because, we say all the time, companies don't actually have a data problem. They have problems. To your point, like, the garment doesn't fit. Like, we use data to find it, but the problem is a garment. Like, it's not about that. So we're looking at these fingerprints throughout the data, that it might be related to shipping, it might be related to interactions with the agents, or wait times, or product defects, or literally hundreds of other things. So we're looking for all of those fingerprints across all of the products, across, understanding cyclicality, seasonal variance per brand, different, we're taking all of those things into account, so that we know when we see something and can go straight to it and escalate that issue. Hey,
you like this video?
I do. It's actually hot off the presses. We're just rolling it out.
That's awesome. It looks great. And you mentioned, sort of just offhandedly, but I want you to talk a little bit more about this, that what you are giving your clients is essentially I don't know what you called it, but it's like a newsletter. You shared it with me and I thought it was really cool. It reads almost like a newsletter of here's what's going on in your business,
Right.
and with pictures and articles, and instead of just, as I said before, another report.
Right. So if you bring up the website and go to the product page, it's just the next page for you. And we can just give a quick visual here.
The product page. Yep. Okay.
There you go. Okay. So this just, and scroll down. I think it's just the next thing. There you go.
There we go.
So yeah, so it's organized as a news feed, and it has a daily section, a weekly section, and a monthly section. So different stories are at different altitudes. So the daily things are like super tactical. This is we have a CX daily forecast that, because we know what's happened, what is so every product that gets sold has a certain service pattern to it. So based upon what's been sold, we know what today's service load is likely to be. So from a leader's perspective, they might, get their team ready. Like, hey guys, we sold a lot of stuff. It's going to be a tough day. We're going to bring in lunch, and get folks ready, or it's going to be a light day. So, hey, we're going to schedule our one-on-ones. We're going to do some coaching, maybe some HR training, whatever it might be. So the daily stuff, super tactical, customer rescues, early warnings, daily forecasts. The weekly stuff comes up in altitude. This might be getting to know your customers better. So customer profiles, fun things that are trying to create a connection between the customers and the brand, because we know that service professionals are dealing with problems most of the time. So we're trying to act as a connector to bring that human experience in. And then the monthly stuff is really deep dives, the month in customers, the month in product, the month in different axes in apparel. There's a fit report. There's a monthly fit report that literally tells them how, what garments are aberrant in their fit, things of that nature. So, but the Storyhub experience is this news feed that is, we describe it as the easiest interface anyone has ever used.
I love it. And I think it is so cool and easy. And it doesn't look like a spreadsheet or what you expect data to look like, right? It's not a bunch of numbers and columns and percentages. It's stories, it's articles. Yeah. It's something that you can scan and scroll through, almost like you're looking at a social media feed, and find interesting tidbits. Andy, we're getting a lot of comments from viewers, which is always awesome. Some questions as well. Chris Strub asks, customers seem to be more aware of the value of their data. Would you say that storytelling makes customers feel more comfortable disclosing data? Now, I know that you're grabbing data that's sort of out there anyway, but I'm sure you've thought about this.
Well, yeah, we deal with the brand's internal data, so we're dealing with all of their internal operational data when we're doing this. But at the heart of what we're doing, and this was when I first was exposed to market research, and it felt creepy, and so as part of Storyhub's value is tailoring, not targeting, missionary, not mercenary. So we're trying to stay away from creepy, because we think that trust is the ultimate, it's the foundation for a real relationship with customers. And, every brand is in the recurring revenue business, even if they don't know it. and they're not going to get recurrence without that trust. So my background is in information security in banking. I built an organization that invented security in the cloud. So privacy and trust are fundamental for us. So we are, we believe that the better a brand can honor that trust, that is a critical dimension in their experience thinking, and as you've shared so much, it's like getting to, the question that I always ask the data team is like, okay, would you use data that way against your mother? And if the answer isn't yes, then don't do it.
So take it from Andy Greenwalt, folks. Stay away from creepy. I think that's the best advice of the day. Another question coming in from Chris. What, if any, is the role of humans in interpreting the data and constructing data-based stories. So I know you aren't just leaving this completely up to AI. I know there's some human interaction. Can you explain how that part works?
Yeah, no, it's an absolute hybrid. So the stories are lovingly human crafted. They're crafted by people who are experts in the domain, so operational experts or sector experts, because what a story has to do, like for it to work, it needs to be self-contained. So someone can say, hey, there's problem X, it has cause Y, and you can do Z. And that's not something that AI is anywhere near doing. So AI is basically, at the point of alert and then correlation of other potential factors. But the actual fingerprint and story that is seen is crafted by people. And so we believe that is a material component. The prospect of getting AI to do this in its entirety is decades away, if any, because the challenge is the Humpty Dumpty problem that I said earlier, because the pieces are data is not created on purpose. Data is a byproduct. It's a byproduct of system A, system B, system C. Like the people who designed the data stores of these things didn't design it for interpretation. It's just a byproduct. It's a record store. And so we're trying to divine meaning out of a record store. And so that requires a human being who understands the relationship of these things. Like when a box arrives busted, like that's a human being knows, like, oh, it's probably dropped, or the internal reinforcement of packaging wasn't sufficient to hold the box stable, and therefore the tape broke, and therefore it's like these how does AI know this? Because AI doesn't interact with our physical world. We do. We have five senses, and that's kind of the challenge in e-commerce versus if we think about like the turn of the prior century, and you owned a store. Your customers literally came into the store, and you got a sense of when did they come in, and did they have kids in tow, and did they come in on the weekends or during the week or at lunch, or like there were all of these different data points. Hey, I put out a pile of merchandise. Well, geez, I've been going back and forth to the storeroom a lot. We must be getting this thing selling like hotcakes. All of that is now hidden behind our walls in ones and zeros flowing through the ether, and consequently, as people, we lack that information. So while we have all of this data, we don't have that visceral experience of it through our senses. And listen, we evolved over millions of years using these senses. Believe it or not, we're not Vulcans, we're human beings, and therefore, directly grokking the data isn't the natural position of most people and most decision makers, and certainly in CX, where you're people, and therefore, a different interaction needed to be invented.
Yeah, I think bringing the human element into it is so critical. There's so many examples of AI where the whole idea seems to be to get rid of the human element, and that's not right. AI can help us be better humans. It can help us be smarter. It can give us the information that we need. It can find, it can sift through all this data in a way that the human brain can't. But you're so right that when it comes down to the interpretation and sort of the so what of it all, we need that human piece. So I'm interested in knowing, and you don't have to share specific examples, but what are the companies that you're working with, your clients, how are they reacting to these stories now that, hopefully there's a lot of eye-opening experiences for them that maybe they wouldn't have found otherwise. Tell me a little bit about the reaction that you're getting.
Sure. So, like what we love is smiles and sharing, and so within that social context, there's they can share it, they can comment it, they can work on it together. So we believe that problems, continuous improvements in the customer's experience don't happen unless you have everyone on the same page and they understand an issue and can work on it collaboratively. So that just that notion where people are exposed to things and therefore interacting, it's one of our customers who's quoted on the site, talks about just, his ability to understand the sales relative to the support in such a direct way, because he doesn't sit on the e-commerce side, so he doesn't see that naturally, but our system surfaces all of this. So people have a much more engaged awareness, and so it's just like they just find themselves asking better questions. And one of our sort of litmus tests of effect is, because NPS, CSAT, meh, it's meh, meh. But customers going from first time purchase to second time purchase to sort of really engage, like those two subsequent conversions tell you that people are happy. In a crowded world, they're coming back. They're electing to do business with you because you got enough right that you were sufficiently remarkable. And so, if you're not remarkable, you're forgettable. And if you're not forgettable, they're buying on Amazon. And so that's really this aha of, I didn't know that, splits between men and women, oh my gosh, like what's happening in Cleveland, so all of these different perspectives that get knit together, and again, in a way that they're just scrolling on their phone on their way to work, and they're consuming information that's making them smarter about their business. And then the super tactical stuff that, hey, people have been waiting for too long on this issue. Let me go correct that. So it's a lot of different experiences. We actually have one story. It's a trivia story. So because our data robots and things came up with a bunch of like little factoids, and we're like, do we know what stories to make with this? Well, the answer was not yet, but they're curious. And someone ordered something with 137 items in a single order. Like, that's a crazy order size. So we put a trivia story, and as it turned out, pardon me, folks found it interesting. So it's and again, that's the broader hypothesis of the business is just, if we can get our employees, get our teams to really understand the comings and goings of the business, the dynamics of the business in a rich and engaging way, then they make better decisions all day, every day. And my challenge to many folks, in the C-suite, I said, so I want to ask your employee about your company, your brand, and literally just count the words and measure the passion of their response. And then if they're a Cubs fan, a Yankees fan, whatever, or their favorite show on Netflix, I don't care, whatever they're passionate about, ask them about that. And you will get a level of verbosity and emotional amplitude that is completely different than their concern with the business. Well, have we, if we're honest with ourselves, really given them a perspective on the business that was sort of rich enough, textured enough for them to really find a connection that the founders and the people who came up with these ideas, like, they have a passion, but really getting that throughout the organization is usually hindered by silos in the organization and political turfs and like a whole bunch of things. And so we're seeing this sort of catalytic effect of just letting everyone in the business see the business in a new light.
Wow. I'm counting in my head the things that I wanted to comment on that awesome answer. I got three things real quick. I think number one, I'll take them backwards order because I think I'll remember them better that way. Number one is, man, when you see passion in an employee, that absolutely feeds into the customer experience. I mean, we've all walked into a fast food restaurant, and the person behind the counter, they look like you're interrupting their otherwise pleasant day by wanting to place an order, or we've all had experiences where the best part of the experience is the person. And so when you can create that passion with employees, no question, it obviously helps employee experience, but it totally bleeds into customer experience. Secondly, is you mentioned, you didn't say these words, but I always like to say that feedback, we call it a feedback loop for a reason, because it is circular. And so part of feedback is taking it and getting it to the right people in the organization so they can do something about it. Right. If people keep saying that your product is broken or that your clothes don't fit, and all you're doing is just recording that fact and putting it in a report, then nothing happens. You have to get it back to the people who are responsible for fixing it. And then even better is when you can circle back to the customer and say, hey, we heard you and we fixed it. This is no longer going to be a problem. So I think that what I love about your software is it really helps with that feedback loop, because it makes the data accessible to everyone in the company, not just the people in the customer service area. It's the product designers, the operations people, the finance people, whoever wants to see it. And then the final part was early on, you mentioned customers complementing brands. And I always think, I wrote about this in my book, is that, I think that is always a huge missed opportunity, is capturing what it is that we're doing well so we can do more of it. And customers love to tell us what we're doing well. We just often overlook it. We don't do anything with it. We don't turn it into a story. So I love that you're also finding the positive feedback and turning that into a story, because that can be just as impactful for the business to say, hey, you know what? People really like it when we do X, Y, Z. Maybe we should do that more often. So love it. Great stuff. Yvonne, thank you for joining us as always. And yes, Andy, I love your passion for what you're doing as well. You could just see I was amped up there in my response. So great stuff. How do people get a hold of you? And I'm going to put up the Storyhub URL again. That's how we get to Storyhub. But how do we contact you, Andy?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Andy Greenwalt, just as it's spelled, ANDYGREENAWALT. There, and happy to share. Clearly, I love what we're doing, and love the conversation. Thank you so much, Dan, for the opportunity.
Hey, it was a pleasure to have you on, Andy. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're making customer experience better for everybody, and that is what we're all about. So thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone watching.
All right, we will be back next week on Thursday with yet another amazing guest. Very excited to bring to you Jeff Weiser. He is the operating partner of L. Catterton, which is the world's largest consumer-focused private equity firm. He's also the former CMO of Shopify and Shutterstock. I guess he likes companies that start with S. But I had the opportunity and the pleasure of serving on a panel with Jeff, and I asked him to be on the show. I'm super excited for him to be here. So we will see you next week on the Experience Maker Show. Again, I'm Dan Gingiss. You can find me at dangingiss.com. I'm a customer experience speaker and coach. Would love to come be at your next event, whether it's for employees or customers, clients, or it's industry show. Love to talk to people about how to create a remarkable experience that can become your best sales and marketing tool. Have a great weekend, everybody. Happy holidays, no matter what holiday you are celebrating. And we'll see you next week on the Experience Maker Live Show.